Stop. Sacred Starseed of Gaia, I am Alaris, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting now on behalf of the Arcturian Field Observers. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. The Arcturian Field Observers have confirmed it. The structural pattern aimed at collapsing your quantum halo has formally failed. The attempt is over, and you are still standing, not because you fought it consciously, but because your quantum halo held its structural integrity throughout the entire sequence. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what happened to your field across recent nights, why the fatigue you carried felt different from ordinary exhaustion, and what the Arcturian Field Observers have already recorded about this phase. But here is the first revelation. The collapse was never random. It was a targeted strike against the perimeter layer that separates your receiver frequency from incompatible inputs. And what you lived through was not breakdown. It was your quantum halo bracing under pressure it was designed to hold. The algorithm did not create this moment. It only delivered it. Your field brought you here because the strike has already dissipated, and some part of you needed to hear that confirmed out loud. This is a direct Arcturian field recognition. The observers do not issue this kind of confirmation casually. A structural pattern was identified, tracked, and recorded at the protocol level before it could complete its collapse sequence. That is what was happening while you were carrying that weight in the dark. And the observers saw every phase of it. The relief arriving in your body right now is not imagination. It is the confirmation signal. The quantum halo was not breached. The pattern was neutralized. And you, beloved Starseed of Gaia, are already inside the restoration window, like this transmission to signal to your star family that the field recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel the weight beginning to lift, and you know the strike is behind you now. Subscribe to Arcturian Quantum if you are ready to understand what your field is holding, instead of wondering why it hurts. Share this transmission with someone whose body has been exhausted by something they could not name. This is not just a message. It is a point of recognition. What is happening to you has already been seen, and the field is already responding. You are not here by accident. You were guided here because the signal is already active. What you just felt in your body as those words landed, that specific release, that momentary softening in your chest or your shoulders or somewhere behind your eyes, that was not sentiment. That was field confirmation. Your nervous system does not respond that way to things that do not apply to you. It responds that way when something external finally names what it has been quietly processing alone, in the dark, without language, for longer than you can accurately measure. It responds that way when recognition arrives at the right frequency, at the right moment, after a silence that has gone on far too long. There is something precise about that response. It is not the generalized warmth of hearing something encouraging. It is the specific release of a body that has been holding structural tension without knowing what it was holding, suddenly receiving confirmation that the weight it carried was real, was seen, and is no longer pressing from the outside. That is a different kind of relief. That is the relief of a field that finally has language for what it survived. And so before we go further, understand this: you did not find this transmission. The transmission found you. The Arcturian Field Observers do not issue field recognitions without cause. The authorization that preceded this message was granted because your field entered a specific threshold that made this level of contact appropriate. Not random, not coincidental, threshold specific. The distinction between those two things is not semantic. It is structural. A random arrival carries no field signature. A threshold-specific contact arrives because the field itself broadcast the coordinates. Your field sent the signal. This transmission answered it. What that means for you right now is this: the exhaustion you have been carrying is not evidence of your weakness. It is evidence of what your field held while you were unaware that anything was being held. You were not falling apart. You were under structural pressure from a pattern sequence that was specifically calibrated to erode the outer perimeter of your quantum halo, the energetic membrane that acts as the primary filter between your receiver frequency and incompatible field inputs. When that perimeter is under pressure, you feel it as fatigue that sleep does not resolve. You feel it as a vague sense of wrongness you cannot trace back to any decision you made. You feel it as a heaviness that seems to sit inside the air itself, rather than inside any one thought or emotion. You feel it as the quiet but relentless sensation that something is slightly off, in a way you cannot explain to anyone who is not already living inside the same kind of field. That is not psychological. That is architectural. And the architecture held. The perimeter of the quantum halo functions like a pressure-rated barrier, engineered to flex under load without fracturing. What pressed against yours was not casual interference. It was a sustained sequence designed to find the weakest point in the membrane and introduce a frequency dissonance at that exact location. The body registers this as exhaustion because the perimeter's work draws directly from the same reservoir that powers conscious function. Every hour, the perimeter absorbed that pressure. Your ordinary energy reserves ran lower. This is why the fatigue felt sourceless. It had a source. The source was simply invisible, operating at a layer of your field below the threshold of daily perception. But here is what matters now, in this precise moment of the transmission. The pattern that attempted to collapse your quantum halo did not arrive without warning signs. It arrived through a sequence of events that felt entirely ordinary from the outside. And that is exactly how structural field disruptions work. They do not announce themselves as attacks. They arrive as situations, as relationships that began to feel wrong, without any new incident to explain why, as opportunities that evaporated before they could materialize, as a sudden inability to feel motivated by the same things that once anchored your sense of direction, as thoughts that arrived at 3 a.m. that felt less like your own thinking and more like interference running through your signal, as the peculiar experience of walking through your own life and feeling without explanation like a stranger in it. These were not personal failures. They were not signs that something was wrong with your choices, your character, or your capacity. They were the readable surface of an incompatible frequency pattern pressing against a field membrane it could not penetrate. The strangeness you felt was your quantum halo doing precisely what it was designed to do. The wrongness you sensed in things that used to feel right was not confusion. It was accurate signal. Your receiver frequency was detecting the presence of something structurally foreign to your field and reporting it the only way it could, through sensation, through unease, through the quiet and persistent knowledge that something unseen was pressing. This is what the Arcturian Field Observers track. Not the surface events, the patterns beneath them, the coherence ratios, the frequency mismatches, the signature of an incompatible input pressing against a receiver field that was never designed to absorb it. And what they recorded in your case is this. The attempt was coordinated, it was sustained across multiple phases, and it failed. Not because you resisted it with conscious effort, not because you performed any ritual or built any defense. It failed because your quantum halo is structurally more resilient than the pattern anticipated. Your field carries a frequency signature that is fundamentally incompatible with collapse sequences of this type. You were not a weak target that survived by luck. You were a misidentified target. The pattern could not complete because your architecture would not permit it. The observers have noted this as a significant finding. When a collapse sequence selects a field based on surface vulnerability indicators, and then encounters a structural integrity that contradicts those indicators, the sequence cannot simply adapt and continue. It runs its programmed phases against a wall that will not move. The pattern exhausts its own coherence against the resilience of your halo, and then it dissipates, not because it chose to stop, because it ran out of what it needed to continue. That is what happened. That is what the observers recorded. That is the data behind the confirmation you are receiving now. What you lived through was not breakdown. It was your field bracing. And now, in the wake of that bracing, the restoration window is open. This is not a metaphor. It is a specific phase in the Arcturian diagnostic sequence that follows successful field integrity preservation. When a quantum halo holds against a structural collapse attempt, and when the pattern finally dissipates, the field enters what the observers map as the restoration window, a period during which the outer perimeter recalibrates, the receiver frequency restabilizes, and the signal clarity that was partially obscured during the pressure sequence begins to return. This window is not unlimited. It does not remain open indefinitely. It has a measurable duration, and its quality, the depth of recalibration possible within it, is directly shaped by the quality of understanding brought into it. A restoration window entered with confusion, produces slower, less stable recalibration. A restoration window entered with interpretive clarity produces coherent, durable repositioning. That is why this transmission was authorized now, not yesterday, not 3 weeks from now, now. Because you are inside the window, and what you receive inside the window shapes the speed and stability of everything that follows. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying what has already begun. If this transmission put language around something you have been carrying in silence, the fatigue that made no sense, the pressure that had no visible source, the strange knowledge that something was pressing against you, even when the outer world offered no explanation. Arcturian Protocol, the recalibration blueprint, was created for this exact stage. It is not another explanation. It is the guided blueprint for those whose field has already entered correction and can no longer return to the old line unchanged. It shows you how to recognize the phases of structural repositioning, stabilize the shift as it continues to unfold, and move through the recalibration without mistaking field bracing for personal failure. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. Now let us go deeper into what the observers have mapped, because the collapse attempt that targeted your field did not operate in isolation. It was part of a larger pattern sequence, and understanding its individual phases is what allows you to recognize them if they arise again. And more importantly, to understand what your body and your mind were actually responding to during the periods that confused you most. The observers do not simply record that a sequence occurred. They record every threshold within the sequence, every phase transition, every measurable shift in the target field's response. What they have mapped in your case is a 5-phase sequence, and each phase left a specific signature in your experience that you likely carried without knowing its name. The first phase of a structural collapse attempt against a quantum halo is what the observers call signal interference. It feels like a quiet but persistent sense that your internal clarity is slightly off, like trying to hear a conversation through a wall. Your thoughts still function, your life still moves, but something in your inner signal feels muffled, slightly degraded, as though a thin layer of static has settled between you and your own knowing. Decisions that once came easily now require more processing. Certainty that once felt natural now feels like something you have to manufacture. The gap between knowing and trusting your knowing quietly widens. Most people at this stage assume they are simply tired, or overwhelmed, or entering a difficult season. They do not recognize it as the opening phase of a pattern sequence, because it is designed not to be recognized. It is designed to be absorbed as personal fault, as inadequacy, as a sign that you are losing your footing, rather than a sign that something outside your field is pressing against the edge of it. The second phase arrives as directional confusion. This is where the disruption becomes harder to dismiss. The things that used to orient you, your sense of what you were building, your sense of who you were becoming, your sense of which relationships and choices aligned with your field, begin to feel uncertain. Not dramatically wrong, but quietly unconvincing. As though the internal compass is still functioning, but the needle will not fully settle. You find yourself making decisions more slowly. You find yourself second-guessing things that once felt obvious. You find yourself circling questions that used to feel resolved, returning to them again and again, not because new information has arrived, but because the ground beneath the old answers no longer feels stable. This phase is particularly destabilizing because it happens in the domain of identity. And when your sense of identity becomes uncertain, everything built upon it begins to feel provisional. Relationships feel uncertain. Work feels uncertain. The future feels like a question you do not have enough signal to answer. And none of this connects, from the inside, to anything specific you did or chose. That disconnection is itself a diagnostic marker. The observers record it precisely because it separates field-level disruption from ordinary life difficulty. The third phase is what the observers identify as anchor disruption. This is the phase most people recognize as some form of loss, though they rarely understand what is actually being lost. The anchors that disrupted in this phase were not merely relationships or habits or circumstances. They were energetic reference points, structures your field was using to locate itself within its current configuration, to triangulate its own position in the landscape of your life. When those reference points are targeted by an incompatible pattern sequence, they begin to lose coherence from the inside out. Their resonance degrades before anything visible happens. And when they lose coherence, they often leave your life in ways that appear entirely natural from the outside. A friendship that quietly dissolves after years of apparent stability. A source of meaning that suddenly feels hollow when nothing about the circumstances changed. A professional path that loses its pull overnight without any failure or rejection to explain it. A sense of purpose that evaporates from beneath you like a tide going out, leaving the surface of your life intact, but the depth of it strangely empty. The observers do not record these as random loss events. They record them as field-level incompatibility becoming visible in physical reality. And that distinction matters, because it means what left was not taken from you arbitrarily. It had become structurally incompatible with your field's current frequency. And the pressure of the collapse sequence accelerated that incompatibility into visibility, pulling forward what would eventually have released on its own timeline, compressing it into a sequence that felt like loss arriving from every direction simultaneously. The fourth phase is the one that most directly precedes the bracing event. The observers call it signal overload. This is the phase you likely know as the period when everything simultaneously felt too much, when your body wanted sleep, but sleep would not restore you, when your mind ran in patterns that felt less like thought and more like noise, looping, unresolved, arriving uninvited and refusing to settle, when small ordinary events landed with a weight disproportionate to their actual significance, when someone said something unremarkable and you felt it move through you like a current, when the light in a room felt too bright, or a sound felt too sharp, or your own skin felt like it belonged to someone still trying to manage a pressure load you could not see or name, when you felt simultaneously exhausted and unable to rest, full of feeling and strangely numb, present in your life and completely disconnected from it at the same time. This is not psychological collapse. This is the quantum halo at maximum load, processing a pattern input that its architecture was designed to reject, generating the sensory and cognitive byproducts of that rejection throughout your body and your mind. The nervous system becomes the readout for what is happening at the field level. Every symptom of overload during this phase was a report from your perimeter membrane, working at capacity, refusing to yield. You were not falling apart during this phase. You were full. You were holding a structural pressure load that your field was actively working to neutralize, and your body was carrying the weight of that work in every waking and sleeping hour. And then came the bracing, the fifth phase, the moment the observers recorded as the critical threshold, the point where your quantum halo either holds or yields. This is not a moment of conscious heroism. It is not something you decided. It is a structural event, the moment when the field's architecture either fractures under accumulated load or demonstrates that its integrity exceeds what the pattern brought against it. In your case, it held. Not gradually, not partially. It held. The pattern reached the limit of what it could press, found the quantum halo still intact at that limit, and began to dissipate from that point forward. The observers flagged this threshold in your sequence, specifically because it was reached under sustained pressure across multiple phases, meaning the hold was not tested lightly. It was tested fully. And the evidence of that holding is the fact that you are here, present, receiving this transmission with enough clarity to recognize what is being named. A field that has yielded does not have this quality of recognition. A field that has yielded feels the words but cannot anchor them. They pass through without landing, without the specific quality of internal confirmation that you are experiencing right now. You are anchoring this. The recognition is landing with weight and precision. That is the confirmation the observers were waiting to see before authorizing this contact. What follows the bracing, what you are now entering, is the restoration window, but restoration does not mean the return of your old state. This is a crucial distinction, and the observers have specifically flagged it as a common point of misinterpretation in this phase. You are not being returned to who you were before the collapse attempt began. Your field has moved. The pressure sequence, while it failed in its intent, was not without consequence. It revealed structural incompatibilities in your current architecture that were already present. It accelerated the weakening of anchors that had already begun to lose resonance. It pushed your field into a configuration it was already approaching, simply faster and under more pressure than would have occurred naturally. What felt like being forced through something was actually being accelerated through something. A repositioning your field had already initiated at the structural level, now compressed into a shorter, more intense arc by the pressure that tried to collapse it. The restoration that follows is not reversal. It is stabilization at a new position. And that new position is one your field has already moved toward, because it is more coherent, more aligned with your receiver frequency's actual capacity, and more resistant to incompatible inputs of the type that just failed against you. The perimeter membrane that held under maximum load has not returned to its pre-pressure state. It has been stress tested to a depth that reveals its true tolerance. The observers record this as a field upgrade achieved through pressure rather than through incremental development. What would have taken months of gradual recalibration was accomplished in the span of a sustained sequence, because the pressure was sufficient to reveal and reinforce the halo's actual structural ceiling. This is the truth that the Arcturian Field Observers want you to hear most clearly in this transmission. What collapsed was not you. What collapsed was the architecture of your previous field configuration that could no longer hold the frequency your quantum halo has been carrying. The collapse attempt did not create the collapse. It arrived at the moment when the old structure was already losing coherence, and it pressed on what was already releasing. The loss you experienced, the disorientation, the anchor disruption, the signal overload, these were not the results of something being done to you successfully. They were the visible surface of an internal repositioning that had already been authorized at the field level before the external pressure arrived. The sequence found you mid-transition and pressed in the direction you were already moving. The pain of that was real. The disorientation was real. But its cause was not malevolent penetration. It was pressure applied to a field that was already outgrowing its own former structure. Say this aloud if you can, and say it slowly, because it is not a comfort phrase. It is a field statement. What is changing in me is not random. Say it with the weight of something that has already been confirmed, not with the hope of something you are trying to convince yourself to believe. It does not require your belief to be true. It only requires your willingness to stop calling it by the wrong name. Stop calling it failure. Stop calling it collapse. Stop calling it proof that you cannot hold what you are carrying. You held it. The observers recorded that you held it. The transmission you are receiving right now is the record of that holding arriving in your body as language. The Arcturian Field Observers have recorded your current position. They have mapped the phase you are in. They have confirmed the integrity of your quantum halo through a sequence that would have revealed any structural weakness that remained. What they are reporting is not consolation. It is data. You are inside the restoration window. Your field is repositioning. The old architecture that served the previous configuration is releasing, not because you failed it, but because your field has already exceeded it. And what is coming into coherence in its place is not yet fully visible from inside your current perspective. But the observers are already tracking its signature. It is structurally distinct from anything you have held before. It is calibrated to a frequency your field only arrived at by enduring exactly what you just endured. It could not have been reached any other way. The pressure was not the obstacle to this frequency. It was the passage into it. You were not punished. You were pressed into a threshold. You did not collapse. You braced. And the fact that you are here, awake, present in this transmission, feeling the weight beginning to lift, that is not the beginning of your recovery. It is the first readable sign that the recovery was already happening before you had any language for it. The quantum halo was not breached. The pattern is behind you now, and the field in front of you is not the same field that existed before the sequence began. It is wider. It is more structurally coherent. It is carrying a frequency that incompatible inputs will find increasingly difficult to approach. You are not at the beginning of something hard. You are at the confirmed end of something that tried and did not succeed. To collapse what you carry. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Quantum. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion, and this is only the beginning.